I think we need to understand that the nature of our tenures across Australia is changing, that the idea of home ownership is for all Australians is fading somewhat, and as a result we need to think about our rental systems a little differently, not as a transitional tenure from when you leave your parents' house until you settle down and get a place of your own, but actually to a long-term tenure and recalibrate our tenancy rules to accommodate that better.
How can we do that? Because as you say, it is geared at the moment to really a short-term young person's game renting.
That's right. So, I mean, I think what we see in other countries is a much more balanced model for our tenancy systems, ones that look after both the investor or the landlord and the tenant. And one of those things is the very short-term nature of our leases. They're typically 12 or 6 months initially and then moving to month by month, whereas longer-term leases are much more the norm in many other parts of the world. And that's the sort of simple mechanism that we could use to start to improve it, but also letting people treat the place they're renting as their home, you know, putting pictures on the wall, having pets, those sorts of things. We see that in some states. We're starting to see some movement in others, and it's important that we really get this right.
Is there a reluctance, Michael, from the landlord, the home owner, to go for the longer term lets?
Well, I think part of the issue is the way our housing or our rental system works is for the industry that supports it, the property management industry. The churn model is a large part of the financial return. So we need to actually incentivise that industry to be supporting longer leases rather than regular churn. And you know, that's quite a significant change in the system for that industry. But you know, if we want to have better outcomes for Australian households, we do need to have a more supportive model that balances and actually works for both groups.
Of course, it is a double whammy with interest rates rising, mortgages increasing. There are a growing swathe who are looking at selling, and then there's less rental available, more people perhaps looking for them if they can't then get a mortgage. I mean, how long do you think that this misery will continue?
Well, I think we need to be. This is where we need to be really careful. I mean, I think some of the politicisation of rent caps and rent freezes starts to create fear or drive investors out of the market or move their properties into short-term letting or other methods. So, you know, we need to actually have a balanced approach here, a comprehensive approach to our reforms. And you know, the Council of Housing Ministers across the country are gathering to share what they've done in each jurisdiction, what's worked well, what are the protections that are working well, and getting best practice from all of that. This is the sort of approach we need that is comprehensive. But there are, I guess, three things we need to look at. We need to look at rent setting and rent capping, but we need to do that in a context of a much more supported rental system that looks after the needs of tenants, the quality of rental properties much more carefully, and we need new supply. We need to really encourage new supply.
But you know, Michael, we've talked about this before, and I know I mentioned that you advise federal government. The National Cabinet have met, they have discussed this in the past. Each state seems to have some sort of action plan, stepping over that line, making these things happen. I mean, what sort of timescale are we looking at?
Well, it is a state responsibility, and as you say, each state has its own approach and has its own reform agenda. But what National Cabinet are doing are bringing those together to share knowledge, to look at what is best practice. And that group is reporting back later this year, I believe around October, with an eye to, you know, a more consistent reform agenda across the country by year's end.
So if we go full circle then and talk of the Australian dream of owning a home turning into a nightmare as we did, how does the mindset of the Australian public shift to a direction that you say is needed to look at rental if the home ownership is not going to be possible with the current economic climate? How do we shift that mindset?
Well, in many ways it's already been happening for quite some time. Younger households are perhaps much less attached to the Australian dream of owning a home, the sense that that's not actually a possibility when the purchase prices, when the price of entry is so high. And so are looking to rent longer, but also to invest their money in different ways.